quote, "Horrible indeed was the method by which the Druids divined the future events after a human sacrifice. The Druids," says Tacitus, "consult the gods in the palpitating entrails of the men, while Strabo informs us that they stabbed a human victim in the back with a sword and then drew omens from the convulsive movements made by him in his death struggles." Diodorus says that they augured from the posture in which the victim fell, from his contortions, and from the direction in which the blood flowed from the body. From these they formed the predictions according to certain rules left to them by the ancestors. So you get the flavor of these practices. These practices are still practiced today by certain Satanist and neo-pagan groups. Now, the Druids believed that October 31st, the night before their new year and the last day of the old year, Samhain, the Lord of Death, gathered the souls of the evil dead that had been condemned to enter the bodies of animals. It was believed that he would then decide what animal form they would take for the next year. The souls of the good dead were reincarnated as humans. That was the conceptions that they held. The Druids also believed that the punishment of the evil dead would be lightened by sacrifices, prayers, and gifts to the Lord of Death, Samhain. Now this begins to reveal the strange link that seems to emerge in later years between some of these Druid practices associated with Samhain and purgatory and some of the beliefs of the Roman Church, the non-biblical aspects of those views. Now, the Druid worshippers attempted to placate and appease Samhain, the Lord of Death, because of his power over the souls of the death, whether these souls were good or evil. For those who died in the preceding 12 months, Samhain allowed these spirits to return to the earth, to their former places of habitation, for a few hours to associate once again with their families. When, of course? At the close of that year, on October 31st. Now, it was on these occasions that ancient fire festivals with huge bonfires set on hilltops were set up to frighten away the evil spirits. The souls of the dead were supposed to visit their homes that day, and the autumnal festival acquired a sinister significance with ghosts, witches, goblins, cats, black cats, fairies, demons of all kinds were said to be roaming about. It was a time to placate the supernatural powers controlling the processes of nature. The hilltop Halloween fires of the Scots were called Samhainagan, which suggesting again the lingering influence of the ancient Celtic festivals. On this night, evil or frustrated ghosts were supposed to play tricks on humans to cause supernatural manifestations. And as part of that celebration, people donned grotesque masks and danced around huge bonfires to scare away the evil spirits. In some cases, food was put out to allow the good dead that Samhain had released to feel welcome and at home. You're beginning to get the picture of how they handled this situation. Halloween also was thought to be the most favorable time for divinations regarding marriage, luck, health, and death. It was considered the only day on which the help of the devil could be invoked for such purposes. That's a strange superstition or thought that emerges in all of this. Now, it's interesting, other festivals throughout the world celebrate a time when the dead return to mingle with the living, it would seem. The Hindus had their Night of Holi. The Iroquois Indians celebrate a Feast of the Dead every 12 years. In Mexico, the Day of the Dead begins on November 2nd, and on it goes. In Russia, all the witches are said to gather once a year. In fact, this is celebrated, Mussorgsky's famous music composition, Night on a Bare Mountain. It's a delightful musical composition. In fact, you may recall it was featured as one of the segments in Fantasia, Walt Disney's Fantasia, Night on a Bare Mountain, which celebrates this belief or this legend or whatever that all the witches in Russia come to Bear Mountain October 31st and they revel all night, and as the dawn comes they disappear, and the music very eloquently portrays that. Now, it's interesting, here's a surprise maybe, in early American history, Halloween was not practiced. It was not widely observed until the 20th century. It was introduced by the Irish Catholic immigrants. They brought these ideas from Ireland. In Ireland, by the way, it's the only country in the world where Halloween is a national holiday. Now, In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church in Europe, in an attempt to oppose paganism that was involved in Samhain, they made, in order to try to offset that, the Catholic Church set up November 1st as All Saints' Day, a day commemorating all the saints of the Church. And the first evidence of November 1st as the date of church celebration occurred during the reign of Pope Gregory III, but it was in 837 that Pope Gregory IV, ordered its general observance. November 2nd, the next day, was later designated as All Souls' Day. You had All Saints' Day and then you had All Souls' Day, which eventually became a special day to pray for the dead. Now that leads to another concept that emerges here. In the late 1800s, it was customary for English Catholics to assemble at midnight on Halloween to pray for the souls of their departed friends. On November 2nd in Belgium, people ate special soul cakes, All Souls cakes, because supposedly the more cakes you ate on this night, the more souls you could save from purgatory. In Sicily, on All Souls' Day, cakes with images of skulls and skeletons were eaten. In France, on All Souls' Day, it was dedicated to prayers for the dead who were not yet glorified. In earlier times, the people took special bread called souls to cemeteries, placing on the graves. People ate these soul cakes because they thought it to be a powerful antidote against any flames of purgatory that might be invoked on the returning ghosts. At dusk, the festival changed from All Saints' Day to All Souls' Eve. Lighted candles were placed on the graves and in the windows to guide the dead back home. These are all, obviously, ideas that emerged in those ancient times that get reflected by various things in Halloween. But we begin to understand, as we look at this carefully, how the ancient practices of the ancient Celts get commingled with the Catholic concept of purgatory. And the Catholic concept of purgatory, of course, is related to the Druid belief that the sinful souls of those who died during the year had been relegated to the bodies of animals. Through gifts and sacrifices, their sins could be expiated and their souls freed to claim their heavenly reward. And Samhain, which is the name of the festival, also some scholars believe was also the name of the Lord of Death among the Celts. He judged the souls, presumably, and decreed in what form of their existence was to continue, whether in the body of a human being or an animal, and so forth. Now, in medieval England, the Halloween festival became known as All Hallows' Eve, hence the name that derives later. And since it was associated with those in purgatory, the feast was abolished by the Church of England after the Reformation, but has since been revived in the Anglo-Catholic churches. And gradually, Halloween, of course, introduced to this country by the Irish immigrants in the late 1800s, it gradually became a secular observance, broadly held, and many practices developed. Now, one of these, of course, that you see associated with this holiday is the jack-o'-lantern. It's interesting how many different ideas try to track that back. It seems that the carved pumpkin may have originated originally from the witches' use of a skull with a candle inside, which illuminated their coven meetings. That's probably where it had a beginning. However, you do encounter some strange legends among the Irish. If you do some research in this area, you'll encounter the legend of Irish Jack. He was presumably a stingy drunk named Jack who tricked the devil into climbing a tree for an apple, but then cut a sign of the cross in the trunk of the tree, preventing the devil from coming down. Jack forced the devil to swear that he would never come back after Jack's soul, and the devil reluctantly agreed. And when Jack eventually died, he was turned away from the gates of heaven because of his life of drunkenness and sinfulness and selfishness, and he then went to the devil, who also rejected him because he was keeping his promise. So as Jack was leaving hell, and it seems that he happened to be eating a turnip at the time, the devil threw a live coal at him. And condemned to wander the earth, rejected from both above and below, Jack put the coal inside the turnip, making a jack-o'-lantern. And eventually pumpkins, especially in America, replaced the turnip, and that's one of the legends, Irish legends, that they tell the kids lying behind what we call a jack-o'-lantern. But it's a colorful, strange thing. But let's move on with the trick or treat and costumes. We sort of associate that with the celebration of Halloween. Among the ancient Druids, the ghosts that were thought to throng about the houses of the living were greeted with a banquet-laden table. At the end of the feast, the masked and costumed villagers, representing the souls of the dead, paraded to the outskirts of the town, leading the ghosts away. Druid ceremonial participants also wore animal heads and skins to acquire the strength of that particular animal.